Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Our story today brings us to the United States in 2025, focusing on a clip that's been blowing up across every social platform. It captures an act of violence so random, so completely devoid of logic, that it sparked a global wave of outrage, with millions demanding swift justice. At the heart of this tragedy is 23-year-old Irina Zarutska, a young woman who had already fled the horrors of war in Ukraine. Born in Kyiv, she and her loved ones barely escaped the Russian invasion back in 2022, crossing the ocean to find a sanctuary in America. They put down roots in Charlotte, North Carolina, believing they had finally found the peace and security that the conflict back home had stolen. Those who knew her best talk about a radiant soul, a talented artist bursting with ambition and big plans for the years ahead. She didn't just live in Charlotte, she became part of its fabric. Known for her infectious warmth and creativity, she was grinding every day to build a fresh existence from scratch. Fast forward to August 2025, and she'd been stateside for about 3 years. She was thriving, though a piece of her heart naturally remained back in her motherland. August 22nd started out typically enough. But as the clock ticked toward 9:40 at night, everything was about to change. She was standing on the platform at East-West Boulevard, waiting to catch the Lynx Blue Line. Security footage tracks her stepping onto the train, ready to head home and call it a night. It wasn't empty. Other commuters were scattered about, just another routine evening on the city transit system. She had no idea that her life was hanging by a thread. She sat there, glued to her phone and watching the city pass by, completely ignoring the figure seated directly behind her. The guy in the red hoodie had been there before she even got on. He seemed restless, shifting around in his seat, clearly on edge. People later recalled he looked visibly upset, maybe even emotional. But crucially, he and Irina didn't speak. Not a single word was exchanged. Everyone else in the rail car was minding their own business, lost in music or thoughts, oblivious to the danger. There were no red flags, no shouting matches. Then, in a split second, the nightmare began. The man in red reached into his pocket and produced a folding knife. He flicked the blade open and froze for a heartbeat, almost as if he was thinking it over. But the hesitation vanished. He suddenly sprang up, looming over the young woman, and drove the weapon straight into her neck. She didn't even have a fraction of a second to defend herself. It went from a quiet commute to a slaughter instantly. Irina slumped from her seat to the floor, her life fading fast from the catastrophic wound. Bystanders were paralyzed with terror. As the assailant didn't stop there, he stabbed her 3 more times while the cameras recorded every gruesome detail. The most chilling part? After the attack, the footage shows him just casually strolling away. No sprinting, no panic, just ice-cold indifference. He walked to the other end of the car like he was out for a Sunday stroll. But during the frenzy, he'd managed to slice his own hand open. You can see the blood dripping from him on the video. When the train pulled into the next station, he took off his hoodie and wrapped it around the cut, trying to stanch the flow. Once the monster stepped off the train, other riders immediately scrambled to help the victim. One brave soul rushed to her side, trying to apply pressure and offer some comfort as she lay there unresponsive, while others dialed 911, screaming for assistance. Panic took over, with some people bolting from the car the second the doors opened, running down the platform to find safety or flag down an officer. It was just past 10 p.m. First responders flooded the scene almost instantly. They checked Irina for a pulse, desperate to find any spark of life. But the damage was too severe. Despite the medics' best efforts, it was clear that there was nothing more they could do. She was gone. While the medical team made the call, police swarmed the station, hunting for the man described by the witnesses. Turns out, the manhunt didn't last long. They found him right there on the platform, just standing where he'd stepped off the train. He hadn't even tried to run. Witnesses were literally pointing him out to the cops as they arrived. Police moved in, and he surrendered without a struggle. He was in cuffs seconds later. Nearby, officers spotted the bloody folding knife, discarded on the ground, and bagged it as the likely murder weapon. The whole response was incredibly fast. Within 10 minutes of the first stab, the suspect was in handcuffs, and the victim had tragically passed. The scene was so horrific that one witness actually needed to be hospitalized for a severe panic attack after watching the violence unfold. Now came the hardest part. Authorities had to contact Irina's family and tell them their daughter was gone, all while trying to figure out the motive. Detectives spent the next few hours building the timeline. quickly identifying their suspect as 34-year-old D. Carlos Brown Jr. CSIs scoured the train car in the station all night, snapping photos, securing the knife, and swabbing for genetic evidence. Technicians mapped out the blood spatter and lifted prints from every surface nearby. They didn't miss a thing. But when they finally watched the onboard security tapes, they witnessed a level of brutality that shocked even seasoned veterans. The video confirmed the worst fear. There was no argument, no history, no provocation, nothing. Detectives started digging into Brown's movements before the incident to see what set him off. They found out he jumped the turnstile to avoid paying the fare. Once on board, he was muttering to himself and acting twitchy, but not enough to make anyone hit the panic button until it was too late. Authorities haven't said yet if he uttered a word during the attack or if he stayed silent the whole time. Why he targeted a complete stranger remains a mystery he refused to answer that night, and one he might not even understand himself. So, who exactly is D. Carlos Brown Jr.? Details started trickling in within hours. We learned the suspect is a 34-year-old man named Brown, currently homeless with nowhere to call home. It didn't take long to figure out this wasn't his first run-in with the law. The guy has a rap sheet a mile long, stretching back over a decade. His criminal record kicks off around 2011. Since then, he has been picked up and convicted for a whole laundry list of offenses across North Carolina. The heavy hitters on his record include armed robbery, breaking and entering, and felony larceny. He spent about 6 years inside for those, finally getting out in September 2020. But walking free didn't mean walking the straight and narrow. In the years following his release, Brown kept finding himself in handcuffs. In September 2022, he was booked for assaulting a woman, though the specific details on that incident are pretty scarce. Then, in January 2025, just 8 months before the attack, he was arrested for something bizarre: abusing the 911 system. Court records from that incident paint a disturbing picture. He called emergency services for a reason that was completely out there. He told officers he believed someone had implanted synthetic material in his body that was puppeteering his movements, controlling when he ate, walked, and spoke. That kind of paranoia is a glaring sign of psychosis. Sure enough, it later came out that Brown had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. His family, including his mom, later admitted he had been battling these demons for years, and they had tried to get him help to no avail. That 911 arrest landed him in court, and by July 2025, his public defender was already raising red flags about his competency to stand trial. The judge agreed something was off and ordered a forensic psychiatric evaluation for that case. But here is the kicker. That evaluation never happened before the 22nd rolled around. So, Brown was effectively roaming the streets while waiting for a doctor's appointment, despite clear delusions and a violent past. You would think that combo would be grounds for immediate intervention. Looking back, it is a bitter pill to swallow. If Brown had gotten the treatment or the help his family begged for, he probably wouldn't have been on that train, and a young woman would still be alive. Police also confirmed Brown and Irina were total strangers. No shared history, no social media connections, zero. Right now, the why is a complete mystery. Some theorize his mental state snapped, driving him to violence, or maybe an internal hallucination commanded the attack. Others suspected drugs, though toxicology didn't show anything concrete. There was also chatter about this being racially motivated, but police haven't found a shred of evidence to back that up, and Brown isn't talking. The picture we are left with is of a homeless ex-con with a violent history and untreated mental illness. For the community, learning the system failed him, and the victim sparked serious anger. And it gets worse. Just days after the brutal September 2nd, 2025 attack, an incident occurred that turned that anger into pure disbelief. The city council gathered to discuss safety on public transit in the wake of the murder. But right in the middle of the meeting, they paused to eat cake. And they posted about it online. A somber meeting about a brutal death interrupted for a birthday party. They tweeted a photo of the cake with the caption, "Here is the cake," then followed it up with, "Cake time is over." Charlotte City Council is now starting its discussion of the fatal stabbing. The internet went nuclear. People found it incredibly tone-deaf and disrespectful. How is a man with a rap sheet and severe schizophrenia allowed to wander freely? Why did the system fail to step in before a tragedy occurred? These are the questions tearing the public apart. On the night of the killing, D. Carlos Brown Jr. was arrested immediately at the scene. First stop was Atrium Health Hospital to patch up some minor injuries on his hand. Police kept a close watch, and the moment doctors cleared him, he was officially slapped with a first-degree murder charge. Authorities announced the arrest and identified Arena as the victim the very next day. Within a week, the legal machine was in motion. On August 29, 2025, after leaving the hospital, he was booked into Mecklenburg County Jail. The judge denied bond, so he is staying put until trial. In North Carolina, first-degree murder is a capital offense. It is too early to say if prosecutors will push for the death penalty, but the default expectation is life without parole if he gets convicted. As the case built up with surveillance footage, witness accounts, forensics, and the knife, a grand jury quickly indicted him on first-degree murder. Naturally, the early legal proceedings are focusing heavily on Brown's mental state. Like I said, his history of mental illness is a major factor here. The judge ordered a competency evaluation. Basically, a psychiatrist needs to determine if he understands the charges and can help his lawyers defend him. Given his erratic behavior and that unfinished evaluation from the prior case, the court needs to be sure he is fit for the murder trial. If he is found incompetent, he gets sent to a state hospital for treatment until he is well enough to face the music. That process could stall the trial for months or longer. For now, he has a defense team. His lawyers have a tough road ahead, insanity defense or plea deal. But with a crime this high profile, anything less than a trial and heavy punishment seems unlikely. It is possible his attorney might try to cut a deal for a guilty plea or not guilty by reason of insanity just to secure life in prison and take the death penalty off the table. Essentially, that route guarantees him a one-way ticket to a lockdown psychiatric ward for the duration of his natural life, though prosecutors haven't signaled any plea bargains at this stage. The headlines regarding Allah's death devastated the local community in Charlotte and sent tremors of grief around the world. A fundraising page was immediately established by close friends to shoulder the financial burden of the funeral. They are also hoping to raise enough to repatriate her remains to Ukraine, should the family choose to do so, an undertaking that comes with a hefty price tag. I've pinned the link to that fundraiser in the description and comments section for those willing to help. Meanwhile, the general consensus from anyone who has viewed the security footage is one of boiling rage. People are demanding an eye for an eye. It is gut-wrenching to witness a defenseless woman, completely unaware of the danger, being slaughtered with such extreme cruelty. The clip is undeniably traumatizing to watch. Across the internet, viewers are demanding capital punishment, insisting this scenario is the textbook definition of why the death penalty exists. To them, any sentence less than execution would be a gross failure of justice for the victim's family. Even for me, diving into Allah's story was difficult. There is something uniquely horrific about watching a meaningless act of violence play out frame by frame. A lot of people are highlighting the cruel twist of fate here. She was supposed to be turning a page toward a brighter future. She successfully fled the indiscriminate bombing and violence of a war-torn nation, only to be murdered in the sanctuary she traveled thousands of miles to find. Predictably, the discourse has shifted toward failing mental health infrastructure and the desperate need to prevent history from repeating itself. Unfortunately, it often feels like nothing ever actually changes. Right now, the family's only wish is for Allah to be remembered for her life, not her death. They want the world to see the talented creative, the cherished relative, and the survivor who overcame unimaginable odds.